Applying the principles of a sculptor is so necessary in developing a good personality, good habits, and good language learning. I love language learning, so I have to throw that in there. When you are first developing, let's say, a diet, it's very intimidating. You don't know what foods you're going to cut out, what foods you're going to add, but you work at it little by little. It's like a sculptor. You chisel little by little until you have, after months or years even, you have this perfect idea of what you're going to do. And there's always, this is why a sculptor is such a good analogy, because there's always a little bit of, say, a chip that you can replace, or a little bit of scratching, or like weather damage, or it's a little bit humid and you gotta like scrape a little bit away. I'm not a sculptor, but I imagine there's a lot of little bits and pieces of maintenance to make the sculpture as perfect as it can be in that moment. Now let's take learning a language. You start out with this big block if you're a sculptor, and you just see what you want. You see inside that sculpture, say, I don't know, say you're like Michelangelo sculpting the David statue. He sees it. He sees all of its vivid details, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. You have to be a pretty seasoned language learner, which I am not, to have that specific goal in your mind, but just to have the vision to start, to know to start with the head and then work your way down and then just perfect along the ways. It's very similar to language learning in the fact that you can start with listening, reading comprehension, get to speaking over and over the same words, the same phrases, learning to talk to people, and then going back to the original. You just go up and down the sculpture, and it's like going up and down your language learning abilities. You got to be able to just talk fluently. You got to be able to listen without going back and forth between your native language and your target language. And then when all is said and done and you feel like you're perfectly fluent and you have a conversation with someone, you're going to have a couple words that you don't really know. That's like a sculptor. You see your perfect sculpture, you walk a little bit closer to it, perfectly examine it, and a little bit is wrong. You shave off a little bit, you sand it down, you add a little bit more paint, whatever sculptures do. I have no clue. But it's very fine tuning. It's very, very rough in the beginning, broad sweeping. I gotta learn to, read. I gotta learn vocabulary. I gotta learn tenses. I gotta learn to speak. And then the closer and closer you get to perfection, you look for the small things and you perfect it. And that is what makes a difference. But that's what makes the difference between someone like me, who is a dunce with like a chisel and a hammer, and Michelangelo, is the fine details. I could make an incredible smiley face, like the emoji. I could probably make that in a sculpture. Give me like 3 blocks and like 2 months, I could probably make like the smiling face emoji. But Michelangelo could make that like a pure smiling face. Like, I can't help but to think about the episode from SpongeBob, but perfecting your personality, being the person who you want to be, whether that be confidence, cadence when you speak. I make YouTube videos where I just talk. There's a lot that I have to learn. So much goes into it that it's just inevitable that you're going to have to start somewhere. You're going to have to start, not necessarily like getting a better camera or stuff like that, but doing the best of what you are. Being a better speaker, writing out the script beforehand, knowing exactly what you're going to talk about, being enthusiastic to make the video so that people can see that you actually care about what you're talking about. And then as you start to make more videos, much like a sculpture, looking at all the fine prints, all the fine details of what he's trying to create, you can get to the point where it's like, oh, the lighting is off. What is this creator doing that I could be doing better? There's a lot of the same principles, and as long as you know that, number one, there is no perfection in anything. This isn't like a video game where you can just have perfect score. This is, real life. You will inevitably have good days and bad days, days where it's easier to learn, some days where it's harder to learn. You might have anxiety some days, and it's a matter of managing the anxieties, and that is also a part of, finding that perfect balance between being a learner and applying it. So just just having faith in yourself that when you like, even like a sculpture, like what if the next time I, hammer this little chisel down, the whole thing snaps and it breaks, like in SpongeBob. That could happen. But you learn how to deal with the inevitable that is, I guess, malpractice. The sculpture doesn't just randomly break. There's too much pressure, or the rock is wrong, or something like that, or you hit it too hard. Something. Some days, you wake up with anxiety. You didn't get enough sleep. Get more sleep. It's the small things that you can do that make the biggest impact over time. And then once you get to the point where you can really focus on perfecting, whether it's language learning or, your personality, then you can focus on the fine details. But working on the fine details before you have the basics down, like 3 or 4 or 5 basic principles, again, language learning, like tenses, vocabulary, speaking, reading comprehension, and listening comprehension. You can't fine tune every single tense when you can't even understand what you're listening to. So it's a matter of having a step-by-step actionable plan to get all of these things done, whether it's personality or language learning, or just conquering your anxiety, or getting a better diet or lifestyle, I should say, anything like that. It's very reassuring to know that you have to start somewhere, and that at least in the beginning, doing these broad sweeping, checks on yourself, very helpful in the beginning. But then the closer you get to perfection, that's when you have to fine tune the details, but you already have a base that you've built on. So hopefully I'll go into more specifics in the next video, whether about any of the topics I just talked about, but I feel like that's a good lesson to just leave. So hope you enjoy the video. As always, please leave your comments. I love the comments. If you like or dislike the video, you throw it up. Doesn't hurt, doesn't help. Whether it's a dislike or a like, it's all the same on the YouTube algorithm. And again, comments are more than appreciated. So thank you.